The new version of my personal finance Power BI dashboard is now available. This new version includes the spend analysis page as well as the banking page, and I've put the link for the files down in the description. And also, this is listed as a separate product, so if you're on the website, you'll see that I've labeled the second version as V2. All right, so for version 2, I've made a few changes, and the easiest way to get this up and running would just be to download the 2 new files and then copy and pasting your data into the new Excel, and then going into the Power BI to make sure that that the data sources are selected. But if you want to do this on your own, I've included the full list of changes in the patch notes down in the description, as well as on the product page, so you could go and read through that if you want to edit your original file. All right, so I have a separate video for this main spend dashboard page, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but just to review, this main page, again, is really just for me to get a quick snapshot of the most important information. If I wanted to get a bit more insight into the data, I could always just hover over these visuals and the tooltips will then show up with more info. It's not really a page where I want to go and change the slicer settings that often. I really just want to keep it on month to date, quarter to date, or year to date. The analysis page, on the other hand, is where I want to keep slicers on a certain setting. And to be honest, this page is really just a duplicate of the main dashboard, but I created a separate page because I wanted a way to basically keep a quote-unquote bookmark of certain filter settings that I need to routinely check within a certain period of time. Now, I'll explain this through examples. There are 2 main situations where I utilize this analysis page. The first situation is when I have to check how much progress or spend I've done on a specific category on a specific card so that I can ensure that my spend is as efficient as possible. So let me explain what I mean. The Chase Freedom Flex has rotating categories that change every quarter, and Chase gives you 5% back on those quarterly categories up to $1,500 of spend. So a total of $75 cash back. And for this example, I'm going to go back to quarter 2 of this year. All right, so this is Chase's built-in tracker on the Chase app, and you can see that the categories for quarter 2 were Amazon, hotels, and dining. Now, if you use this frequently, you'll know that the progress bar doesn't actually update live. It only updates after each statement period. But I like to make sure that my spend is efficient, which means I don't want to put more spend than I need to on this card, which might happen if you're approaching the maximum $1,500 of spend and can't see your progress live. This is where the analysis page comes in handy. Since I want to track my progress on those categories for the quarter, I could change the slicers to the CFF and keep those settings on until I reach the $1,500 of spend in those bonus categories. Now, as you can see, I've got the CFF already selected. Same as date, I've selected quarter 2 of this year. Now, if we take a look at this category visual, you could see that my spend was pretty efficient. Now, you could ignore grocery and gas because that's part of my sub. So for the CFF, I got 5% on grocery and 5% on gas for the first year. So if we ignore those, you could see that the spend was pretty efficient. Here, I'll make it a little more clear for you. If I select dining, miscellaneous, and shopping, you could see that I went just, $10 over. Now, for me, in my books, I don't keep Amazon as a category. You could if you want on your own, but if I hover over shopping, you could see that's Amazon, and miscellaneous also Amazon. So pretty good here. Once I hit the $1,500 spend, I basically just moved all my dining spend back onto the gold. And so that's how you can use this page here. Now, it's important that you track your progress by spend rather than cash back because the amount you earn can be different than what you expect. So when the category is dining, the cashback rate on the Freedom Flex actually becomes 7%. I don't want to get too much into the details of cards because this is focused on the Power BI, but just know that, dining during this quarter was 7% on the Freedom Flex. Now, this is much higher than the actual tracker, which uses the category bonus points earned. So using cashback as the measurement could result in an overestimate of the cashback you could earn, which then leads you to missing out on potential cashback. Now, the second situation where this page is useful is similar to the first. However, instead of category, it would be for offers. So just to give you an example, I've been using my Chase Freedom Flex for groceries because my sign-up bonus was 5% on gas and grocery for 1 year. Now, typically, I would put that grocery spend on the Amex Gold, but since the Flex earns 5% and the Gold would be 4%, I used the Flex. Now, recently, I got an offer on my Gold for an extra 4 MR points per dollar on grocery spend, which makes the gold earn 8% since it's already earning 4x points on grocery. However, you could see that it's only up to 2,500 points, which is basically $625 of spend. So I want to make sure that I only spend $625 on grocery on my gold and then switch back to the flex. All right, so heading back over to the Power BI, I'm going to show you what I would do to track this Amex Gold offer. And all I really do is go to this account slicer and change it to Amex Gold. Now, just as an important note, do make sure that your slicer settings are correct when you do this on your own. For example, I didn't put any grocery spend on my gold card for the last year that I've had this Freedom Flex until I enrolled in the offer. So I know for a fact that if the beginning date starts anytime within this past 1 year time frame, it would be grocery spend done after already adding that offer to the card. Also, if your spend is more complicated, maybe you've got multiple users or whatever the case might be, you may have to change the other slicers or even filter by transaction to correctly calculate your progress. As you know, for Amex cards, offers are separate for each user. So if you have multiple authorized users, each card is treated separately. And so that's why we've got to use these user filters here at the top left. If they spend on grocery and don't have the grocery offer added to their card, you're not going to get the bonus, even though it's technically the same card. So again, do make sure that your filters are set correctly so that your calculations are correct. And then another important point is to make sure that before you do anything, I would just do this whenever you start up your Power BI, make sure that you click this refresh button at the top, just so that you can get the latest data available. And then make sure that your date slicer, if you're trying to look at anything recent or like the latest day, you do need to make sure that this end date drag ball thing is dragged all the way out, because it's not going to drag it out for you. So sometimes maybe, you've got 722, you refresh the data, it's not going to drag it out. You just want to hold this ball, drag it all the way out just so that you get the latest day. All right, so now that I have those slicer settings correct, all I have to do is look at this category visual, and I can look at grocery and see how much I've spent and then calculate how much spend I have left. So as of right now, I can spend about 400 before the bonus falls off. And then I have until September 13th, as the offer says. So this is how I use this spend page. Let me know if it's useful for you or if you want other features to be added here. Now let's move on to the banking page. All right, so what I have open here is the template version of the banking page. So this is what you would get. And this is different than my personal banking page because mine is a lot more complicated. I've got people owing me money, and then I've got to keep track of a bunch of different dates and all that. So I've basically simplified it down to not have so much fluff. And I think this would be good enough for most people, especially since for most banking information, you could just get it directly from your bank's app. Now, I want to start with this Excel template just so that you have a better understanding of how this data is set up. So the first few examples are investing. So you can see transfer to Vanguard, Robinhood, and Schwab. And so basically, this is what I do in my sheets. If I transfer to a brokerage, I just label the category as investing. That way, when I sum it up in the Power BI, I just sum by anything that is labeled as investing. And then I just put different values here for the credit just so that it's easier to differentiate once we go back into the Power BI. Now, next up, you'll see this transfer from Venmo and transfer to HYSA, or the high yield savings account. And what's most important here is really just this category name, right? The transfer in and transfer out. Now, this is different from the deposit, payroll, or payment, because deposit or payroll is money coming out of nowhere. Well, obviously not out of nowhere, but coming from some other source, some accounts that's not ours, and then that money's flowing into our account. So then that becomes our money. And then payment or Zelle out would be money that's leaving our accounts, and we don't see those ever again, right? So if you're paying someone or you're giving money away, that money disappears. You don't see it anymore. Whereas transfer in and transfer out is money flowing in and out between our own accounts. So that money's still ours, whether you transfer it in or transfer it out. And so for a quick example, just looking at this transfer to HYSA one, you can see it's a transfer out of 500. And then if we go over the high yield savings account sheet, you'll see that the same transaction shows up, except it's transfer from Bank of America checking, and it's a transfer in on this side, and it's a debit on this side. And then the last few things that I added was just Zelle from a friend and Zelle from a parent. That's just so that I can kind of have more examples of different inflows of money, which I'll show you in the Power BI. All right, so now we're in the Power BI, and starting at the top here, this is just cards similar to the spend dashboard. So the top left is payroll earned. And so if we go over to the measure, it's just payroll is equal to the sum of all the debits as long as the category is labeled as payroll. And you can see this is just a weird way of me writing docs. This is just the first thing that came into my mind was to use this dictionary. Obviously, there's other ways to write this, but basically it's just anything that's payroll and a debit, that's, you sum it up. So that's how we get the 11K, and it adds up same as the Excel. Now if we look at the investment amount, you'll see that the DAX is a little different here as well. So it's basically, this is like the normal way, I guess you can call it, of summing this up. So it's just summing all the credits of so any outflows of money, as long as the category is labeled as investing. And then if you change the the category name within Excel, make sure that you change those here in the Power BI as well. And then next up is balance. And so balance for Bank of America, you can see this is how I did it. There might be better ways to write the DAX, but basically I'm just summing the balance. But you don't want to actually have it sum the balance, because then you're going to become like a trillionaire. But basically it's just sum of balance, but as long as it's the account name, like the account is BOFA checking, and then as long as the index is the highest possible index, so it just returns the last most recent balance. But that's just because if we go over to the transform, right, and we look at the data, same as the Excel, same as the credit card aggregated table, the aggregated banking is just the combination of this checking account as well as the high yield savings account. And so you'll see that at the very end, so after I combine them, I changed the types to make them correct. And this is only showing up because I have the Excel open. So you want to make sure the Excel is closed, and then you refresh view so you can see here. And so I sorted the rows by date, sort ascending, and then added the index at the end. So that's why you see this in the DAX. I do the highest here, the max index available. And then you'll see over here on this balance for the high yield savings, I actually did it a separate way. So instead of pulling from the aggregated table, I'm pulling straight from the high yield savings sheet. And so this is kind of the same way. Obviously there's a bunch of different ways you can do DAX, but I have two different methods because these are just two different things that popped into my head at the time. But basically, again, you grab the last non-blank of balance, and as long as it's the max date within the sheet, that's what it returns. You might run into issues if one of these have like a zero balance. Let's say you move all the money out, but you can mess around with the DAX just to fix that. Or if you do find an issue, just let me know. I can try to mess around with the DAX and try to fix that. So yeah, so that's it for this top cards here. Now next up is this inflow and outflow here, and again, this is not really how I do my sheets, just because mine's more complicated. But so inflow is just the sum of debit. And again, you could rename this. So here you could just go over here, rename this visuals, make it like inflow if you want. But that's what the actual thing is, sum of debits. And then there's category and transaction. So you could see, payroll all from the company, and then Zelle in. Like I said, that's why I added the two different examples at the end. You can see Zelle from a parent or Zelle from a friend. That's basically it. And then there's more stuff here if you want to see. But more importantly, I feel is like outflow. And so for here, it's just sum of credit, but I just renamed it to outflow. So if I hover over this thing here, you can see it's the sum of the credits of the aggregated table. And basically, you can see where your money's flowing. This is what I like to see on mine. And so for investing, I can see, okay, 3,000 is going to Schwab, 2K is going to Vanguard, 1K is to Robinhood. So that's why I put the different values, so it's easier for you guys to see. But yeah, that's pretty much it. And then the bottom here is just same as the spend dashboard and the analysis page. But except it's just the banking. So the most recent banking activity, because I sorted by date, and you can see all types of banks here. If you have more than one bank, you can see high yield savings here as well, because this pulls from the combined, so the aggregated table. And that's it. Yeah. And then, oh, and at the very top here, I do have a separate card here, which is showing the same information as this card here. The reason why I put this here is because you can see if I click this, you'll see this is the old card. Whereas if I click this, you can see over here, these are the new cards. And if you look at this like formatting, the call out value formatting, these new cards are really weird. You can see they're all K, so they're all in thousands. And I can't really find a way to not show that. I want it to be like, I wanted a way to show the exact value, which is why I use these old cards. But if you see here, I'm not really able to find where I can change that in these call out value settings for these new cards. So I just included the old card here. If you want this formatting, you could just copy paste this multiple times and then change the field, the data fields here, to be whatever you want. So yeah, and that's it.